Today's episode is sponsored by Dance Gamers. Dance Gamers is the leading distributor of video games and other consumer gadgets like the podcast microphone sets, ring lights, headphones, and affordable smartwatches, and many other cool gadgets. For these and more, visit their website at www.dancesoftgamers.co. That is www.dancesoftgamers.co. Mujevale, Mujevale, Mujevale. My name is Bani Kibuka, and welcome to another episode of the Ugandan Ball Talk Show. So welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I've wanted to have you on the podcast. I don't remember how long. It's been a long time. And I came across your Instagram, and I really appreciate and love the work you do. But not only that, like to the people who are listening to my podcast, ever since I started doing it, they were like, there's this lady, you need to host her on your podcast. You need to have her on your podcast. Like, I swear, like 10 people were sending me DMs on Instagram, like, hey, you need to host Nyonyozi on your podcast. We love her. And when I put out that post to people ask questions, I asked a ton of questions that we're going to talk about today. But also one girl was like, oh my God, I met her on the airport yesterday and I said, hi, I love her a lot. I know I've come across you on Instagram before, the time when my podcast got nominated by Pulse Uganda for the podcast influencer of the year. And I was literally messaging everybody to look for votes, because it's a stressing time where even the person you've never spoken to, you just message them to try your luck. And I still remember your response that you gave to me in that time, because you really didn't know anything I do about my podcast, and you can't just recommend something you have no idea about, And I understood that, and I actually do the same thing. Like if somebody reaches out to me like, hey, promote this product for me. Like I've never used the product. I'm not going to go out there and tell people to use it if I've never used it myself. So I think that's the very first time I messaged you on Instagram, and you got back to me explaining that to me. So that was the first time I came across you. And the other part is I hosted one of your co-hosts on the Unpopular Opinion, Fiona Kemi. She was on my podcast, I think, a few weeks ago. So that's how I've been around and getting to know you and all the people that recommended you. But I want to start with the name Nyonyozi Prim. Is that your real name, or is that's just your Instagram name? And if not,
name? It's actually my real name. But Prim is Primrose. Only that I cut it short to Prim. Because that's what my friends call me.
Okay.
Primrose is very government. It feels like it's something my bosses call me, or like headmistresses in school. It was like a name that they used if there was like something wrong. So that's why I shortened it to Prim. Prim is fun and just chill.
Did you get the name from high school? Did that nickname come, or the short form come from high school, or?
I think so. High school. It was always very easier for people to say Prim than like Primrose.
Okay. So and since we just started a new year, I like to ask people how their 2022 was, like just a summary of 2022. How was your 2022 summary? Or if you can even add on January, since we just finished January.
Honestly, 2022 for me wasn't so great. Okay, the year started off on a good note, and I think by like October I had to go in for some surgery that was supposed to be minor surgery, right? Like, okay, not like big surgery and whatnot, but I got complications after, and I was in hospital the rest of the year, like from October till pretty much mid-November. Then I came home, but I had to I had to go back to, like learning the basic things. I could not sit, I could not stand, I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't do anything. And I remember lying there and thinking, oh my goodness, at the beginning of this year, I was happy, I was healthy, I was walking around. And now I can't even explain it to myself that I can't do any of the things I used to do before. But January was off to a good start. I think in Jan, I was mostly recovered in Jan. And yeah, so January has been a really good month. I will be very honest with you on that. January has been a good month.
I think the time you're talking about, I follow you on Instagram. So I saw when people are wishing you and then you posting about your recovery and what you went through. And I'm glad to see that you're doing fine and you recovered very well. So that's good. And it's good to hear that this year started off pretty good for you.
Thank you. Oh, this year is doing so great. It's a good year.
And I hope it stays like that and keeps going on like that. Um,
Amen.
so I mentioned in the beginning that I hosted Fiona Kemi here, who works with you at the Unpopular Opinion, which I'll ask you later on a little bit about it. But how did you meet Fiona, and what's your relationship with those two co-hosts that you have on the Unpopular Opinion?
So in 2015, I I went for a military course, and Fiona also came for that military course, and that's the first time that we
You guys
met.
were doing the military?
Yeah, we did it. We did a military course for 9 months,
Okay.
and that's how we met. But we weren't really friends there. But the few silent notes, we had like a few silent notes. Obviously, that like I'll drop a joke, and then you're in the middle of nowhere, you're going through all this gruesome training, and then I drop a joke, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, you watched that show?" We'll talk about something, and I remember there's a time I was talking about a certain meme. I don't know if you know that meme of "Why the hell are you lying?" The guy with the box haircut and all.
Yeah, yeah.
And Fiona is like, "Oh my goodness, that meme!" And we discussed it for some time, and it felt so good. It felt so good to see someone, like, to just talk to someone who gets this kind of thing, to talk about anything, like a life outside this, yeah? Outside
Mhm.
where we were, right? So
Yeah.
that's the first time that we met, and we worked together for I think about 2 years. And yeah, she left, but that's how I know Fiona.
Okay.
So we worked together for, I think she left in 2020 or 21,
Okay.
and we had met in 2015. So that's about 5 years, I think.
How about the other one? I think she uses Be Your Own
Claire.
Boss. Yeah, Claire.
Yeah, so Claire moved back to Uganda, and I remember when she was trying to settle in, she came across my account, and she texts me, like back and forth, like, "Hi, oh, could we meet and do something?" She's like, she's like, "I'm trying to settle back into Uganda, and I'm looking for, like, first of all, I'm plus size. I'm looking for items to wear, and also I'd like to get into the social media, space in Uganda. And you're the one person that I've been following that's, like, shared like their authentic journey. What? So could we meet and just talk, and you take me around?" And I remember the first time we met was in Muyenga. There's a restaurant somewhere, and yeah, we met, hit it off, and yeah, here we are.
That's cool. And the reason why I asked you the relationship between with those people because your guys' production is really good, the show, and to see all these different people coming together to do one thing, you all like have different characters, but all your characters like come together to make like a really good production. And that's why I was asking about the behind the scenes
Thank
of how
you.
you met. And I told Fiona that when she was on the show, like I follow your guys' show, and I really love the topics you have there. They're so educative. And if anybody listening that has never listened to the Unpopular Opinion, it's there on YouTube, and you can watch their shows out of Uganda. And the few things you touched on that I want to talk about the jokes. There's this one video you put up on Instagram about the URA charging beauty. That was funny as hell. Like I was just, I watched. I remember I was like, guys, I have something I want to put out. How did you come up with something like that?
So, I don't know. I remember actually being in my kitchen, and I was recording a YouTube video, right? And then I said something like, I remember, like, in the night, you're done showering, and then you've done your moisturizing routine. Like, you've seen girls' skincare routines, they leave you looking like a donut, right? So I'm just like, oh my goodness, why am I out here acting like ordinary? Like, I could be, like, I should be taxed. I should be paying tax for this, sort of beauty. Then I was like, oh, wait. Okay, so I wrote down that joke. When jokes come to my head, I have such funny conversations in my head. Like, I actually think I have funny conversations in my head. Anyway, so I note down some, and then I develop or build on those. Like, if I intend to post, I will build on the joke. I write it down and then build on it and see how I can now post it on my
Yeah.
Instagram. Some, they're just like, I'll just have a moment, laugh about it, and move on. But if it's something that I can build on, Yeah, I always write it down. So I wrote down the joke, and then I was like, okay, this is how I'll bring it out. This is how. So one day I'm just seated there, and then I open my camera and I roll.
That came off really good. I opened the video. I'm like, what is he gonna say today? What is and like it was so emotional. Like if before you said what you're gonna say, like everybody's attention. You had the attention. What she was saying.
Yeah.
And that's how I was with it, and it came off very good. Um, have you ever thought about doing stand up?
You know, the thing is, I feel like I'm not that funny.
Okay,
I'm not that funny. I
so like,
get that a lot. Like, oh, you should actually think of, stand-up comedy. But I feel like, oh my goodness, those guys are such heroes. You know what it means to get people to laugh, to get
yeah,
like a whole crowd to laugh at your jokes. I feel
mhm,
like my friends probably find me funny because, they're just my friends,
yeah,
Will. But getting a whole crowd to laugh, so like different humor appeals to
mhm,
different people, right?
yeah.
So imagine you have them in an audience. You have different people who like different humor, and you're trying to make them laugh, all of them with one joke. Like, please meet
Mm.
here. This is the intersection. This is the junction.
It takes a lot of talent, yeah, to keep people
It
laughing.
does. It
And
does. Lots of talent and writers.
okay.
Yeah.
And I understand what you're saying. Like even me, like I could say a one point like through a text, like I could be
One
funny
line.
through a
Yeah.
text, say one line, and that's all I got.
Yeah.
And that would be funny. But yeah, I when you were talking about that, I thought like, oh, maybe you could think about doing a comedy or something like that.
No, I'm not that serious. I'm not that serious.
So I'm going to incorporate the questions that the people ask me as we have a conversation. When something pops up that relates to a question somebody asked me, I'm going to bring it up. And this is where I want to ask about. Somebody was talking about your confidence and like the way you post, the way you treat yourself, the way you love yourself. Like if somebody goes to your Instagram, they see the love you have for yourself, and you leave that by example, like love, self love. And somebody, you inspire a lot of girls. Like I told you, like about 10 girls were asking me, hey, host this person. And one of the girls has asked, like, hey, Nyonyozi, have you always been this confident, like how you live your life? And that was a question they want to ask you.
I want to say yes, but because I'm trying to look back at a time when I didn't feel that confident, and honestly, I don't know if that time was there. But the thing is, most of us would actually be doing well, right? You're growing up, most of us would be doing well, would all be confident, right? But then the outside factors happen. The outside factors being school, the school you go to, the friends you have, the places you go. And that's when it's like our bodies are like a boat, and then like a hole, that's when the holes start happening and the water starts seeping through, right?
Mhm.
So the water are the external forces, and then it starts seeping through, and then you start hearing all these things that, like, you start hearing people define you, and you start to question yourself, like, who am I? Who am I? Like today you listen to someone else tell you something else, the other day someone else tells you something else, and like one day you're like, one day you're like, it's like you're at sea and you don't know where, like, which direction to really go to. You don't know who you are. And I think for me that happened probably in my O levels. My O levels is when I was terribly bullied. I think that's the one time when I ever questioned myself, when I was not confident. But I think after that, I went to like a really good school. I went to a good girls' school, and I was right back to where I used to be, like
Right.
back to where I was in the beginning. And I don't think I've looked back since then.
And that's I had that down in my questions, part of like going through high school, and if you had that confidence throughout high school, because I know in especially in the schools in Uganda, you can get like bullied a lot by people, and not even in Uganda, but high schools all over.
Yeah.
There's different kids like all over who come from different backgrounds. And I had that question down to see how, and I'm glad you shared that. At what point or what brought back your confidence?
So before, my parents, first of all, parents really play a very big role. I know that you could be having young listeners on this podcast, but I want them to also bear in mind that your parents play such a huge role on your confidence as a human being. And let us be very clear, Basha, when we talk about confidence, what human beings feel like, understand as confidence, is a fat girl wearing jeans or crop tops like I do. But it goes beyond that, right? Confidence seeps through your work relationships. It seeps through how you perform in workplaces, how you perform in class, how you excel in your friendships, how you perform in day-to-day life. Confidence, right? because that's how you realize that most of the people that have had successful cons, they've been very confident people. A con man cannot be rigid. He can't be timid. You
Right.
can't be conned by a timid person, right? Like even in workplaces, it's the people who, they're those workmates that man, so and so doesn't even know these things, but there's a way he'll talk about something, right? Have you ever seen someone talk about something like they have such confidence about it and knowledge and yet I'm probably smarter than this person, or I have more information about this. You get so confidence. Let's not look at clothes. Let's not look at, oh, she's fat and she wears crop tops. No, that's not just what confidence does, right? It's much, much more than that. Anyway, having gone to like a school where I was terribly bullied, I was forced to question myself and question so many things that I knew about myself. When I went to the girls' school that I joined, this is Boranyanji Girls' School, the girls there were very confident, right? They were very, like, people used to mind their business. There was never any competition. There was never any point where you had to like no one's beauty ever dimmed another person's beauty. You understand?
Right.
Everyone knew they were beautiful. The way they used to walk, my goodness. I still remember on weekends when we were out of our uniform and girls would plait their hair and they would walk with their necks, just with their faces up and very straight shoulders. And it was a very beautiful place to be. So for me, it reminded me of who I was in the first place. Like before the world came in to tell me who I should be. It reminded me of who I was, of who my parents raised me to be. And honestly, that was like a good kick in the right direction. That really helped me regain my confidence.
That is really good. And I'm glad you shared that, because I've hosted a few people, mostly from Uganda, who went to like single sex schools. And I try to ask them what the benefit from there, or what the comparison with the mixed schools. But I'm glad to hear this perspective of you sharing about your single school that you went to, like where everybody treats each other the same. And would you say that it would have been different for you if you were in a mixed school? Like,
definitely, because I was in a mixed school in Oliver, and this is something that I've been dying to put on my stories and talk about, especially to young girls. I don't know if you studied in Uganda at any point, but anyway, it's the same elsewhere, right? Everywhere in mixed schools, you're going through like a teenage, you're teenagers, right? So you're starting to be attracted to one another. Boys are attracted to girls, and vice versa, right? So there's something about being the girl that boys are not attracted to, right? So you keep asking yourself, first of all, there's something I realized that for me when I was in school, the reason like these other girls were, I don't know, like they would, be cozy and touchy with the boys. And I was really very stern. I was stern and firm and, oh, do not do that to me. Do not, do not dilly-dally with me, right? So I realized that lots of guys used to like stay far away from me she had kajanja, right? So I know that there's so many young girls who go through mixed schools feeling like, am I ugly? How come the boys do not come to me? But well, sis, sometimes they're going to these other sisters because they let them do certain things that you cannot tolerate, right? That you do not allow. You understand? So it didn't mean that you're ugly. It didn't mean that you're undesirable. It just means that you have standards.
Standards,
right?
yeah.
You have certain standards that and like men sense these things. Please correct me if I'm lying. Men sense these things. Men sense when a certain woman has certain standards, and they'll be intimidated. They'll be insecure. Some will brand you. Oh, she's too
Easy to get.
conservative.
Oh,
no, some will be branded she's easy to get. Others will be branded she's too conservative, right? And they'll make you feel like she's just uptight, right? She's uptight, but it's because you've said no. This is what I can't tolerate this.
yeah, that is definitely true, and you're right.
And being in a mixed school, man, it has you up in your feelings. It has you doubting yourself. Like, am I weak? That's the slang they use. Am I weak? Why aren't guys, like fighting over me? Blah blah blah. But I would like to remind a certain girl out there who is listening that you're not weak. You're not undesirable or uptight. You just have certain standards that these people probably do not want to meet.
Yeah. That is true, and that's a good one because I also had that question down here that if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
It would be that.
Okay.
It would be that. Oh, I think it would be that you are who you think you are.
Yeah.
To think, to think, to think that I ever looked at anyone and compared myself to these people around me. You get like
Mhm.
I should have felt like the goddess that I feel now.
Yeah.
Like now to tell you the truth, when like when I get people telling me, "Oh my goodness, I love you, Prim," in my DMs, like no offense, in my head I'm always like, "It's all right. I love myself for myself, and I love myself enough for you as well." So I love you now. How? What do I do with it, right? Or it's things like, "Oh my God, you're so awesome." I feel like, yes, yes, I
Mhm.
know. Like I know. The awesomeness is coming from me into the outside, not the outside into me,
Into
right?
you.
Like I wish I felt like I felt the energy that I feel about myself right now.
Mhm. That is really good, and that's a good advice too. And that brings me to one of the caption on your Instagram. You say this year's theme is going to be delusional. What does that mean to you, and why did
Yep.
you go with that?
I think it's going to be, you know how you say, someone tells you, I know like when I do videos where I'm just like, oh my goodness, what a hot chick. I know there'll be someone thinking that, my guys, I don't even see what this chick means. She's not even hot. That's the thing. I'm going to be delusional like that. Like when you come to me and say, "Oh, I would like to work with you. What's your rate card?" And say I give you a rate card that says I charge say 1 million for this, and someone is like, "Oh my goodness, who does she think she is charging 1 million? She's Beyonce." That's the thing. I'm very delusional. I think I'm Beyonce.
Okay.
So the theme, as in, we are going into this year with like we have to be very delusional. When delusional people do things, it's like how they say ignorance is bliss. They're ignorant, or you like when you're ignorant, you just walk straight in. It's like a child when they're touching fire for the first time. They come and grab it. So when it burns them, they'll be very cautious, right? This year we're not being cautious. We are doing things. If we make mistakes, we'll learn from them. There'll be another year to correct those mistakes. We are still young. There's a very great life ahead of us. So if we walk in two rooms, we are not going to bend and do our shoulders a certain way to pass, like, oh, excuse me, may I? No, we're walking in with head held high. I don't know if you read a book when we were younger, The Emperor's New Clothes. There was an emperor who used to walk naked, and for him, he thought that it was such a nice cloth, it was trendy. Yeah, we are going to be like the Emperor's New Clothes.
And that's the thing I got out of that, and the caption from that picture too, like baddest, and that's what I got. But I wanted you to talk about it when you put words to more.
It's definitely not even just about the looks. To tell you the truth, I feel so great.
Yeah.
I feel healthier. I've shed a few kgs. I feel healthier. I'm healthy. I'm eating healthier. I'm walking. I'm practicing healthier habits. I feel really good, right? Because I was pre-diabetic last year. I had high blood pressure last year, and those things have now, normalized. They've come down. I feel great, right? So it's not even about looks. It's not about. It's more than that. Your health. It's how I'm doing my work going forward, right? I am not afraid to make mistakes anymore. I'm not afraid of failure. This year, we're not afraid of failure. We are delusional. We are going to be delusional. We're going to go in. If we make mistakes, if we fail at something, we get up, we get up again, and then do it over and over again. And I know that one day you ace it.
I love that, and I love that spirit, and I wish a girl out there or a guy out there listening, and this could be for you
Yeah.
too,
It's
and anybody.
yeah, as a creative,
Yeah.
you doubt yourself as a creative. You know that you're in the creative
Yeah.
space. You doubt yourself, but you have to be delusional. Like you have to pretend that, oh my goodness, if I don't put out this podcast episode this week, about 2,000 people will be disappointed. Who cares if it's only one person? You're
Hmm.
going to be delusional and put out your podcasts. Do these things like the world is waiting. Like, oh my goodness, there's a platform out there and everyone is just waiting for me, one person like this.
Yeah.
That's the energy.
That's the spirit right there, and I love it. So when I planned to host you on the podcast, you also had a get to know you on your Instagram, and I was going through some of the questions
Yeah.
people were asking. Oh my god, some of those questions were the ones I wanted to ask on the podcast. But some of the questions that stood out to me, and you were answering about this question when they asked you, when will you officially get married? And your answer was pretty good to me, stood out to me, and I wanted to ask more questions about that. Like, when did you get the idea of wanting to get married in your own house, and what's that going to look like?
So it's very funny. One day, when I was still actually renting my old house, my boyfriend and I had dated for probably like a year, and we sitting at the balcony and talking about what our dream wedding, what he was telling me about what his dream wedding would be. And he said something like, I wish I could get married at home. Like people just come home and we celebrate. I remember screaming, like I screamed and stood up and said, oh my goodness, this is one of like so many other confirmations from God that you really are my person, because that is what I want. I want to get married at home. And I want to tell you, Basha, even like at our house, the balcony is big enough because we know that we'll, like, even when we sit there, it's like, also, this is where we'll put the table. This is where the high table will be. Like, even when we are, like, we're about to start constructing the fence and the compound, right? And I remember the architect was saying something like, oh, you do, you know, like, as you put a step in the compound. And we're like, no, the guests cannot sit like that. Sorry, we'll be having a wedding here. We can't have some guests sitting, you know, lower than the others. So let's make the compound leveled. And it's something that I think we've always known. Like we've known for like say 3 years now. Like I always wanted a wedding at home, and my fear was meeting someone who wanted a chidara, like a big wedding,
Yeah.
because I am not up to it. I'm such a very I love my peace. I am a lazy bride. I do not want to go out looking for like clothes. I do not want to go out looking for a gown and trying on every now and then juicing and dieting for that gown. No, I want to wear like a normal random white dress,
Yeah.
and then go to church. We come home and have lunch with our friends. But most importantly, I would want my friends to give honest speeches about us, like across the table. I
Yeah.
want them to say things about me before they say them when I'm dead, right? So I want an intimate small wedding at home where our friends will stand up and talk
Yeah.
about us genuinely, right? Not a huge function where someone is like, oh, Prim, you'll give the speech on behalf of friends. And then Prim is like, where do I start? Prim, you girl. What can I say? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to hire venues. I don't want to go into that. But I also, what I've told you.
Yeah. That is really good, and it's a cool idea. But one thing that pops up in my
Also, we
head.
don't have money. Let people not, let me not romanticize the idea. We don't have money. That's the other thing.
It's always smart about like saving the money too. Like it doesn't make sense to spend $1 million, like $1 million. I'm saying $1 million, but like a lot of money in a wedding, and then like you don't have a house where you're gonna stay the next day. And most people do that. Like they'll put like do like a really big chidara, put a lot of money on it, and the next day, like it doesn't even have a house where they stay. So it's really sometimes you gotta be smart about it. But one thing I was gonna bring up on that, like so that's going against the culture, but like how does that come to you, like with your family, like because we grew up not seeing weddings like those, like how do you go about that, and what does your family think about it?
I've talked to my mom actually, and I've told her that when that time comes, we're going to come to you and ask you what dowry you want, and then we'll give you that dowry, and then we will invite you to now our house for our wedding. Like
Yeah.
we don't even want to do like the giveaway ceremony, or if we do, it will also still be very quite small, right? And generally, anything to avoid tents, anything to avoid tents,
Yeah.
putting up tents and whatnot. But my mom, thankfully, is on board. She raised us alone. She's a single mom, and she raised us. And you know, you sit her down and tell her, look, we don't have the money for a big traditional wedding, but also we don't want it. And she understands. I
Yeah.
mean, it's your life.
It's
It's your
always
life.
good
Actually, most of these functions are for our parents. Do you realize that?
Mhm.
Our parents tell you things like, I have a list of 50 people
Yeah, exactly.
and you need like say 100 guests, and now you have to fit your friends into those 50, your parents. These things are mostly for our parents, by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
that a lot with my dad too. When I'm doing something, like if I'm gonna go back to Uganda and I want to do like a party, my dad is like, Bunny, I have a lot of people, and like I have a lot of like
Yeah,
friends, like it's mostly
it's
about
always about them.
them and
Yeah, it's mostly about the parents, yes.
their
And I think times are changing, because while it's mostly about the parents, they're not giving you as much money for that function, the big function that they want you to throw.
Yeah. And that brings me to this one question that I had on here, and I prepared this for you. I'm glad we got to this. What's a funny story that your family tells about you, and like you would like to share? Like if your family is picking out a story, what's a funny story that will share about you?
I think it would be the story of how this. I used to see my mom ironing clothes, right? with a flat iron. So one day I'm very curious. Like she stops ironing the clothes. Like she's done ironing, and I get a flat iron and also try to iron my thighs. So I still have the scar up to now.
That is crazy. That's a really funny story. And also, the other question, these are some of the questions that people were asking me to ask you. What's your biggest failure and what did you learn from that experience?
I've really failed quite a lot. Oh, I failed quite a lot. Okay. So back in 2020, right? We are starting to construct, right? And I remember we had saved up money for construction, right? I had saved up money for construction, blah blah blah. And then this is about say Jan, right? Then in March, construction is going on, and I decide, and like someone tells me, they're selling the land next to yours. And I'm like, all right, I want to add it to mine. So construction is happening, you're spending money, right? I think it's been my biggest failure yet. And you decide to acquire the next plot as well. That means you're also spending there, right? So I tell a friend of mine, uh, you know, give me a loan of this much, and I top up to get the other land, right? And it was a con. The land was fraud. It was not. It didn't exist, right? So I had
Mm.
spent that money for nothing. The construction is going on, but also I went like when we went in, there was no saving whatsoever. Like get 10,000. You know how you get, let's say, $50. You're in the US, $50, and instead of saying that, let me remove $10 for bills, you get everything and put it in construction. So anyway, COVID happens and the lockdown happens, and I keep looking back and I'm like, I had debt. I was in such deep debt. The debt from the friend that I borrowed from, the building itself was not complete. We were not living in it. The land was fake, right? And I had to pay the hardware and the builders. I was in debt to the hardware and the builders. So I remember talking to a friend of mine, like, oh, I'm actually in debt and it's so bad that I barely have food. But then I was not officially dating my person. And I'm like, I have no food. And she goes like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, weren't you saving? I'm like, I was putting all the savings the other side. And she's like, are you serious? Like, she's like, Prim, you never put all your eggs in one basket. Like you never use all the money for construction. What do you mean you are putting all the money there? And I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, like that's what we were doing. We were bringing money and putting it, in one place. Like, are you mad? You always remove, a percentage. And that's the day that I learned that is a discipline I learned about money that I didn't know before.
Yeah.
That no matter what you're doing, you don't put all your money in one place. You
Yeah.
don't. You just do not.
Mhm.
It's risky, and it took such because man, I went through that lesson for like for like the whole of 2020, right? Struggling to like struggling financially, but for me that was a lesson. You never put your finances in one place. Be it your savings, you never save with only one thing. You understand, you
Yeah.
get money and you allocate percentages. Let this go here, let this go here, and let this go here. And you never say that, oh, let me use the construction money for food, or let me use the one for food. No, you allocate finances differently.
Yeah. That's a good lesson. Did you ever figure out about the land? Like what ended up happening? Did you just lose it? Or did
Because well, there's lots of cons happening in
yeah.
Uganda, yeah, when it
I,
comes to
I
land.
I hate that. And my dad has been in the same situation before about that. And I don't know, it's just sad when somebody does something like that. It's heartless, like
Yeah.
it breaks my heart when I see that. Um, we're coming close to this ending. I still had some few questions, but because of the time, but one two more questions, and then I have other questions about the podcast. I'm gonna ask you, and we'll wrap it up. One of it is your hobbies. One person asked about your hobbies, which you were answering on your Instagram too. But I've recently seen you like going out, and you post about the Gwanga Muje concert, and I think I've seen you experience at Nyege Nyege. Do you like to go out to events like that? Is that part of your hobbies?
The thing is, I actually like sitting in places where people are hanging out. It's a way it gives me, it's like the happiness in the air
Vibe.
rubs off on me. The vibe, what's
Mm.
the
Yeah.
vibe? But also, I went out a lot when I just like entered uni, and then one day I just stopped. I felt like I was up to here, I was done. But lately, I actually like to hang out with people because it's a conversation to get to know them. Like it's a chance to get to know them
Mhm.
outside, say workplaces, outside just daily hustle. It's a good time to get to know people when they are relaxed and
Yeah. Mm.
just come.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that too. That's one of my favorite things. Now, besides that, do you have any other hobbies that I know you mentioned you like to read. Is it something you're still interested like in?
Lately, I do read here and there, but I love history. I love history so much. Like I know so much about World War II.
Yeah.
I know so much. I know so much about European history, like the small countries. I know so much about the Holocaust. I
Yeah.
love history so much. I was thinking that, like, given that chance, I think I'd become a history professor. I am obsessed with history. I love history. So I can watch documentaries about history over and over and over again. So yes, I watch documentaries about history.
Yeah.
I
That
watch
is
history documentaries.
that is crazy. I was never good at history. I mean, I did it good to pass the exams, but I was never interested in it that much. But I was more of a
I was
geography.
excellent.
I was like geography, you get me. Like I like that. But history, I struggled with that. I mean, I still passed it, but I struggled in just getting that in my head, memorizing those names and like kunta kunta. What?
Places and years and yeah.
Yeah, and yes, that's and even when
I
I
do
came
that so well.
with it, when I came
I do
to
that so well. I memorize dates and whatnot well, really well, but not birthdays. Ah, those ones, no.
I finished my studies in the US. I went to college here for 4 years, and I took a class, World Civilization, and you have to
Yeah.
memorize all those. The what's his name, Martin Luther, whatever. It was hard.
Malcolm X.
All that,
Mm.
and American history
I
and all.
really love that stuff. I
Yeah.
love that stuff. Like I wake up one day and I'm obsessed with one person. If it's Fidel Castro, I will read about Fidel Castro, read about everything, every article there is about him.
Yeah.
And it's history is a very good thing. Like there's a way it fits into each other, like when you're looking at I don't know if you've watched that the Peaky Blinders. They're talking about, it's towards, they're from the World War,
Mhm.
and then they're talking about industrialization, which is pushing them out, which is pushing out the gangs, right?
Yeah.
And you can, like when they mention Churchill, oh my goodness, I'm just like, oh my goodness, they're talking about Churchill. I remember the time, Churchill, they're making all these decisions that the economic depression is about to, hit them. All those things. So it really
Yeah.
seeps into each other. Like you realize that this was happening in the US, this was happening in the UK at this time. This is what's happening in Africa. This is that the industrial revolution is what they now start taking slaves to the US and the UK. And yeah, it's just all connected.
Yeah.
I really love history. We could sit here and talk about it for the whole
That
day.
is
So
that
I'll
is
just stop.
sometimes I struggled with history because like some of the things I can never relate to it, but some of them you do, and those that I would relate to, they would come easily. I'll learn them easy. But so yeah, this other question I'm gonna ask you is, well, what do people misunderstand about you the most?
Hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
I guess maybe because it's
I
like
do not know.
when people misunderstand, they just keep it to themselves, so you never get a chance to know it.
Then I never get to know. Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, I have these last three questions I like to ask people when I host them on the podcast. And thank you for accepting this request to be here. I had a good time to get to know about you, and I'm sure my listeners will also get to know about you and all the people that wanted to have you on the podcast. One question is, what's been a life lesson? I know you've shared something like you learned from a question I asked you, but what it could be, what's a life lesson you've learned in life to this point?
It's been actually a hard lesson, but like I said, history teaches you that the world is not for the weak. The world is not for the weak, and even like just daily occurrences, the world is not for the weak. We have to be aggressive. One day, I woke up and it hit me that your competition is not just your neighbor; it's the entire world. You're competing with the entire world because right now the world is such a global village, right? you could compete for the same job as someone else who has such great and excellent opportunities, who has gone to certain schools and colleges where they had more opportunities than you. But no one is going to feel bad for you because of that. No one is going to feel bad that, or you come from Uganda and you probably didn't have electricity while the other person had computers, right? No one is going to feel bad for you. So it was such a sad realization. Capitalism is here to stay, and capitalism pushes out the weak. It's like a mercantilist theory. Like if you, it's like I don't know, like the weak people somehow you fall off the wagon. So it's very important that we don't have pity for ourselves. That we never feel like poor you or poor Prim. You see, people want to understand that you're suffering, blah blah blah. The world is moving on and very fast, with or without you,
That is
unfortunately.
that is
So the
true.
world is not for the weak. It's not for self-pity. It's not for, you can't explain to anyone that you never had the opportunities they had. We hear you. You didn't have the same opportunities. But so what?
Yeah,
So what?
that is very
Like, no one is going to come back behind and pick you up. It's you. It's you.
mhm. You're gonna have to
And
pick
your
up.
competition is the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good life lesson, and I'm sure people out there listening, they've picked out something from that. The other question is, what gets you excited about life?
Dressing up in the
Yeah.
morning. Goodness. I love to dress up. Like if anyone ever said, Prim, we are meeting at such and such a place, I'll start thinking of what outfit to wear. I love dressing up.
Yeah.
I love dressing up. And this year I just love being alive. I love being alive. This year I really love being alive and just being healthy.
Is there a specific person like you like their style, like you admire their style to put in yours, or like?
It actually changes, but there's a South African blogger called Cynthia Gwebu. I've talked about this. I really love her style.
Okay.
It's it's style that I incorporate in mine. Like I love her. I love her style.
Yeah. And the final question, this is my signature question of the podcast. Who would you like to see on the podcast next? And you're gonna help me find the person to be my next guest on the podcast.
Have you talked to Rebecca Nanjago?
No, I have not.
You should. You should.
Okay.
You should. I really love her. I
Okay.
really love her. She's she's so brilliant. She's such a brilliant creative. When I see what she does, I'm like, I hope no one ever calls me a creative because it will be an offense to Rebecca.
That's fine. That's fine.
I do not want to be described with the same word that describes her. I feel like she's a genius.
Yeah.
So yes, Rebecca
That'll be
Nanjego,
interesting
and
too.
yes, I will put you in touch with her. And she's also a podcast actually, so
All right.
I'll put you in touch with her.
Yeah, actually, I think somebody mentioned, I don't know, I don't remember. But yeah, that would be exciting to talk to her, and that would be cool to talk to another podcast. I love it when I talk to other people who do podcasts to just learn their stories and listen to their lives. And also, I want to thank you again for accepting my request, and I can't wait for my listeners to hear your wisdom and to hear some of your jokes and your life and some of the things that you've talked about that they didn't know about.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you and see you.
Bye.
Bye. Hey there, this is Bonnie Kibuka, the host of the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. Thanks for watching and listening to my podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it with a friend and recommend somebody to this podcast. Don't forget to leave a feedback on this podcast because that's how we grow. And also don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. Join us on our social media platforms on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much and be blessed.